basic 90-degree radius elbow, how to lay it out. We're going to talk about centerline radius, developing the heel, the throat. We have a radius elbow here, a width, which can be any width. We use 4 inches by 10 inches wide, basic 90 degrees. The other elbows we talk about are using, so we don't have to keep repeating information, we're going to use a 10-inch centerline radius, but we're going to talk about transitional elbows, how to develop these using a 6-point method, all beginning from our flat bottom pattern, our cheek pattern of 10-inch radius, using the same centerline radius as we did before. Once we go over this and we talk about this, we're going to actually talk about an identical 90-degree elbow, but this is what is called a drop cheek elbow, and the difference here is we don't have a bottom pattern to get our true length lines that we'll talk about that are necessary for our top cheek. So we're going to go over a lot of different elbows, yet we're going to keep everything 10 inches with the same centerline radius, so we can just flow through this video a little easier and you can have a better understanding of what we're doing. Beginning with a 10-inch 90-degree radius elbow, we have to lay out 2 cheeks. We have a top cheek and a bottom cheek, and they're identical. So when we lay out the top cheek, we can use that cheek to as a pattern for our second cheek, and we'll talk about that. Here's our blank that we're going to use to lay out the radius cheek for the elbow. And the first thing you need to do is mark off your lines for your 1-inch allowance for your S-slip. And from that point on, we'll work in the radius cheek pattern. So we'll mark this 1 inch. Just like that. And we're going to have a starting point on the corner of the 1 inch. I use just a scratch awl and tap that there. Our 10-inch centerline radius we talk about, and we go over this again later. 1-to-1 radius to width ratio, meaning we have a 10-inch wide opening here, and 1-to-1 means we want a 10-inch centerline radius. Center of the opening over 10 inches, if this is the 10-inch point, means our point for striking our throat and our heel will be 10 inches from the center. And that's what we get when we talk about centerline radius. We chose 1-to-1 radius to width ratio to keep it simple. Using your scratch awl here and understanding what we got here, from our 1-inch allowance on our S-slip here, we're going to mark our center line of 10 inches. That's center line. From that point, we'll mark half of our opening, because that is the center line, of 5 inches or 15 inches from our 1-inch mark. Now, understanding that our 15 inches will also be our radius that we'll strike our heel with, and when we go to figure out the stretch out for our radius, the 15 inches will be that radius that we multiply the stretch out by. From that point there, we mark back 10 inches our opening of our elbow. Now you can mark this back 10 inches, or you can understand you need to go 5 inches. You're going to come up with, a way of doing this that works best for you. Now we need to strike an arc for our throat and strike an arc for our heel. And we'll use these trammel points to do that. Setting one end of trammel points on that mark you made with your scratch awl. To the distance of your throat. Strike your throat. And then reset them to the distance from that same 1-inch point, 15 inches to where we made our mark for our heel, and strike your heel. Before you forget, add your allowance for your flange. And then again, add your allowance right away for your throat. So you don't cut this out and have an oops because you forgot to add your flange allowances. This is all it takes to lay out a radius elbow. The cheek for the radius elbow. And when we cut this out, we can use this pattern to develop our other cheek. Yourself a good duckbill snips, or you can use just a regular set of offset snips. The throat is kind of tight to use the duckbill snips, so we'll use our offsets. The next thing you want to do is notch out your flange allowance and your S-slips. Your flange is not formed to include the S-slip. The S-slip never includes the flange allowance. That's for locking in your Pittsburgh later, as you'll see. Make sure you have your safety glasses on. And that's our cheek pattern. Okay, we'll take another piece of steel and scratch out our second pattern for the second cheek. Line everything up on both edges using your scratch awl. All you need to do is mark along the heel, your allowance for your flange and your S-slips. Be careful not to move that. We'll cut this one out. Cut out the throat. And we'll notch out again. Okay, now what we have is mirrored copies of our cheek. Mark these some kind of reference that this is the inside, so you run through your machine, you'll remember which one. This isn't so critical because this could be flipped around. It doesn't matter. But when you start getting into other fittings, it's a good habit to have, to marking your inside of your fittings. Okay, we ran our two pieces, our two cheeks, through the machine for our 1/4 inch flange for the heel and the throat. Now we need to determine the stretch out length of the heel and the stretch out for the throat.